Breaking Bad. Now, we love you, everyone who listens to our full podcast every week, and we love you, everyone who watches on YouTube. We also want to give this week a special welcome to listeners of our new mini podcast, Practically Culture Breaking Bad, which you can find as its own feed on iTunes as soon as the feed clears, and on practicallyculture.com. Well, it's nice to have a great show to talk about again, Bob.
Wow, yeah. And you know what's crazy is this has been a great show for a long time, and I guess I need to get this out up front. I caught up on it in the last few weeks. Actually, I started catching up on it a few months ago, but life got busy, and I was slow in my catch-up. But then, with the final season coming and the podcast and everything, I just watched a lot of Breaking Bad in the last week or two, and it's been great.
Nice, nice. So you can watch the final season with America. I feel happy to welcome you into the Breaking Bad fold. We've never really talked about Breaking Bad because it wasn't a show that you were caught up on for whatever reason, and now this will be the first time really we've ever talked about it together.
I know it'll be interesting because there are a lot of little particulars that I could take different ways or interpret different ways, and I guess we'll save all of the pre-season 5, second half of season 5 stuff for later, but I feel like you and we have like a separate lifetime to catch up on that, or we need one or something.
Yeah, and I'm just really happy to have a show that I love, that's great. I like some of our other recaps, some of them I don't, but we haven't had a really great show for a little while, so it's just great for that.
Yeah.
So what to talk about? Let's jump in. There were 3 scenes that I really loved in this episode, Bob, that I really felt structure held it up, and I'm going to take it straight to the last one. Walt visiting Hank in the garage. So the way this show plays with tension on both a micro and a macro level, it's just superb. It's like this show's playing chess to most other shows' checkers.
Yeah.
So so if we go to that scene, on one level, we just have what happens. Walt comes in and he checks on Hank like a good brother-in-law playing dumb. Hank is pretty much on to Walt by this time, but he doesn't want to be found out. And he plays it a lot. He plays it a lot less cool. You can tell something's bothering him, but he's trying. And then it looks like Walt's going to walk away and let Hank think he has no idea he's onto him. But then he pauses. He gets that Heisenberg look in his eye, and he goes back in with a tracking device. Stupid or smart, Bob?
I'd say smart. At this point, it seems like Walt has figured out pretty clearly with the missing book that his brother-in-law's onto him, that Hank's onto him, and if he didn't do this, if the cards weren't on the table in this way, I feel like he wouldn't have as much of a chance to have an upper hand. That said, one thing the show's doing again this season, which it's done in previous seasons, is we do see a future state already of Walt, so we know he's sort of quote-unquote lost as far as his house is empty and has graffiti all over it. So anyway, that's messing with me. When you ask a question like smart or stupid, it's like, well, I think it's kind of smart, but it doesn't seem like it mattered anyway. But
yeah, ultimately, we don't know exactly what happens, but it doesn't seem like Walt is where he envisioned himself this whole time.
Right.
Although, we'll get to that flash forward a little bit later. I still want to focus on this scene. So, whether it was smart or stupid, it's inevitable, right? Because the Heisenberg alter ego has always been about being recognized as not only brilliant, but powerful, and not only powerful, but more powerful than you. It's like a classic supervillain flaw. He can't just win. He has to make sure his enemies know that he beat them. He has to give the speech. He has to alpha dog them, sort of like Gus did to him with the box cutter.
Right. Of course, he does get punched in the face, and I'm sure that's a risk he knew that he's used to getting beat up a bit, and it doesn't faze him so much anymore. But small price to pay for making a statement, Heisenberg-like, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. Because he does let Hank punch him in the face, and he doesn't fight back because he's above a petty garage fist fight. He just talks calmly, and he ends with just a devastating line: "If you don't know who I am, tread lightly." And Hank's about shitting his pants there because he realizes, what Hank gonna do? Is he gonna shoot Walt? He can't because Hank's a good guy, and the paperwork involved, if nothing else. You know what I mean?
Right.
And if he had enough to arrest Walt, he'd already have done it. And who knows what Walt might do? I think that Hank's probably giving Walt credit maybe for even more things than Walt has actually done, because he didn't list. But one thing that's probably big in Hank's mind is when those two brothers came and tried to kill him. He probably thinks that's Walt.
That's a good point. It very well could have been Walt and Hank's mind, and Hank also has the family issues to deal with, which of course he's going to have to deal with that regardless. But yeah, shooting him or taking him out more directly, answering to Marie and to even Skylar and to the family, to Junior. I don't know. This is like one big clusterfuck for Hank. I mean, it's already been for Walt for like 5 seasons, so it's like Hank joined the
Yeah,
party.
and even if he takes Walt down the old-fashioned way, he's going to look perhaps with like he has pie on his face because his own brother-in-law was doing this for a
Oh
long time. I
yes.
guess it's only been a year, but still a long time.
Still, that's an eternity for a dude who's like a hero for being on top of so much stuff. This is a direct counter to that, so
Right.
he's in a tough spot.
So, great scene. But there's another level of meaning, sort of the macro. Now, I don't know about you, but I sort of figured the confrontation with Hank was what we'd be building to all season long. But bam, the show just went there, and it shot that bullet. And who the hell knows where we're going from there?
Yeah, I was impressed with that too. I mean, this is the first episode of the final episodes, and I thought the whole thing with Hank, they could pull a. It seems like there are other shows where the final interaction is in the last episode or in the quote unquote penultimate episode, but this one's just like, nope, we're going to open with it, and you get to see a delicious play by play through the whole season, which I don't know about you, but I'm excited for. I think that's a cool way to do it.
Yeah, it's off the rails now. No one knows where it could go, and I think that's pretty exciting.
Yep.
Okay, so working backwards, there's another scene I loved, or actually, part of me wants to say I really hated sitting through it, but I found it completely riveting, and that's when Walt visits Jesse. So ever since Jesse
Oh,
left Walt's operation, well, what has Walt done? Walt's killed Mike's 10 guys, and Jesse correctly puts together that Walt never would have done that without taking care of Mike first. Um, and so what this scene shows is what Walt has become. Already his wife hates his guts. He started all this for his family, supposedly, and now Skylar can't stand him. And now even his closest partners in crime are terrified of him. And they're worried, with good reason, that he'll kill them too. What's to stop him? And Walt gives the most unconvincing, "I need you to believe me on this, son." And Jesse's response, it's like, okay, I believe you, but he's so guilt struck by everything that part of him thinks he like deserves Walt to maybe kill him too. So his guilt is coming out, and he gives a very unconvincing "I believe you too." It's just wow. This is it. This is like as far as Walt can go. Some bad guys have a code they work within, or some people are off limits who are their friends or family or whatever, but not Walt. He's just this wild animal, could strike anyone at any time, and I thought they showed that really well through this scene.
I agree, and it was sad for me because now I feel like we're already starting to see scenes where Walt has to the story has to develop without Walt interacting with someone because there's no one to talk to anymore. There's a lot of
Mm.
like empty pauses, and it's clear now. It was already building to this, but even Jesse is off the team in terms of. I guess Walt has this new helper boy, Todd, who is kind of a yes, sir, I'll do whatever you say. But even then, it's too little, too late, and it just does feel like Walt is a one-man team. And I wonder if there's supposed to be a tie back to Gus, if we're supposed to believe Gus was this way, because even Gus, I feel like had people he trusted in a way more than even Walt does at this stage. But maybe I'm reading too much into that parallel. But yeah, I think it's going to be the end of Walt because once you can trust no one, I mean, he's got to go back on Lydia. He's Skylar's out. Hank, of course, obviously. Jesse. I mean, who is left in his life that he can be completely honest and open with? No one, right?
No one, and I think Gus is different because Gus, reminds me of when we recapped the bridge. That drug lord, he was a businessman. Walt is not a businessman. Walt is a wild animal who can't even appreciate the value of relationships and trust.
Yeah, he's got kind of a maniac streak now, and each catastrophe that happens, his reaction is somewhat less. Like when Todd killed the boy while they were robbing the train, it was like Walt was very methodical and, well, here are our options. Yep, it's a terrible thing, but we got to move on. And like, Jesse is kind of the constant in terms of the normal human reaction to these sorts of things. He
Yeah.
hasn't really given in, but Walt is like progressively uh, given in to the point where like now killing a kid on the fly is not as big of a deal as it. Even Mike like showed Todd his place afterward. Like next time you bring a gun to a job. Anyway, I'm just pointing this out because I feel like Walt gets tough for things that affect him that he's not planned for. But if things go wrong, but it ends up helping him and it involves a child dying, we're to that stage now where that's no big deal for him. So,
Right. The
geez.
only thing that matters to Walt is winning. The only thing.
Yeah, gosh, yikes.
So, yeah, Jesse is clearly tortured by everything that they've done. Just like you're saying, he's like the stand-in for the audience, at least conscience-wise. It's nice to know that someone is a little bit troubled by all the things they have to do to get where they are. And we start to see that in my other favorite scene from this episode, and that's when Badger and Skinny Pete are having a serious geek out Star Trek moment. And as a huge Star Trek fan myself, I just loved it, and it was just funny. And that's something that sets great TV apart from really good TV, in my opinion. The dynamics of tone. So I can be laughing out loud in one scene, feeling like shit about Walt and Jesse's relationship in the next, and then glued to the set for the showdown between Walt and Hank in the third moment. Some shows do just one thing, and even if they do it well, it gets either boring or exhausting because it's just one thing. And the scene wasn't just funny, it also did some important work. And just, I don't know, chess versus checkers again.
Yeah, yeah. I have to admit something. I mean, I liked the scene, but I started to zone out. I was like Jesse a little bit as the story went progressively on. I was like, wow, this is something else. But probably maybe I should rewatch it and follow it through because it did seem kind of funny, but I didn't stick with it all the way to the end.
Well, what was funny was their reaction to it, and Skinny Pete, I mean, they're both high, and Skinny Pete's like, no! Oh, in space! That was as funny as anything, I thought. The way they took
Yeah.
it so seriously. But the Star Trek was spot on. That was excellent, too. Um, they also snuck in a little interesting reference by talking about Chekhov from Star Trek. You've heard of Chekhov's gun, Bob, or have you?
I know Chekhov, but Chekhov's gun I'm not as familiar
So,
with.
the Russian playwright Chekhov, he supposedly said something like, "If you show a gun in the first act, it must go off by the third." And that's just an
Ah,
old school story writing thing. And so it could be a clue to chickens coming home to roost at the end. We just saw the ricin, and so maybe it's Chekhov's ricin. We saw the ricin never be used. Now it has to be used. Who knows? But they did talk about Chekhov there, and Chekhov's gun is a common story writing technique. So, hmm.
wow. We're on a whole new plane of foreshadowing. I like it.
So let's talk about that flash forward with the ricin. We learn even more than we did in the first part of the season's flash forwards, right? So, what do we know from this flash forward all the way back? We know Walt has a fake identity from New Hampshire. He's got beard and hair again.
Yep.
It's his 52nd birthday, so that zips us ahead. His 51st birthday was just a couple months ago, right? So this is like
Yeah.
9 months or so since, or after the things that are showed in real time. He's got a big ass gun. Um, he goes to his house, which is just abandoned and stripped bare, and skaters are using his pool. His neighbor is terrified of him, so people must know who he is. Heisenberg's written across,
Yeah.
and he needs the ricin. I feel like I'm still just analyzing, gathering the data here. I'm not necessarily making any predictions yet, but it looks like shit has definitely gone sideways for Walt.
Oh yeah, and of course it's an easy target here to speculate on who the ricin is for, but I don't even know if I want to get into that because there are only so many people left that are that important to Walt that he wants them dead as much as alive, which is why it's complicated. Like anybody I'd name would be like, no, really? Oh, no, that's impossible. Like it can't just be somebody like, Skinny Pete. Or,
Right. It wouldn't be. I mean, who? I said I wasn't necessarily going to speculate, but F it. So what? Lydia? Maybe because she said something
oh,
like, "You're putting me in a box here," so maybe she's done something weird.
well, he was already going to try to use it on her at one stage previously
That's
anyway.
right.
So,
That's right. And then she had a good deal for him. Um, Hank, it's always a possibility that to win against Hank, he has to take Hank out. Um, what? Mike's gone. I don't think he'd do in Saul. God, I hope it's not Jesse.
yeah, that would be whoa. Yeah, so we should leave it at that. Who knows who it is, and we'll assume it's none of the major characters for now, or at least I'm going to assume that. I don't
Well, I'll
know.
keep an open mind. um, so there was another geek out topic. One of the most
Okay.
interesting recaps I read was a piece by economics columnist Matt Iglesias that pointed out two economics references in the show.
Okay.
One, I guess Larry Summers has famously said that no one ever washed a rental car, as an example of the importance of property rights and ownership. And Skylar, she's just, I want to figure out who washes a rental car. So that was sort of a nod to economics geeks, I guess. And then two, it's a famous monetary policy idea that dropping money out of a helicopter might, under the right circumstances, help the economy. And Jesse, throwing money out of his car, he was trying to single-handedly put that theory to the test, it looked like.
Well, yeah, not that he has any knowledge of economics, but he certainly needed to do something to blow off steam and deal with that money because he kept trying to give it away in the worst way possible. um,
Right.
and this is actually a pretty clever way to do it for being as simplistic as it is, but sure, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, just some economics geek out stuff there, in addition to the Star Trek geek out stuff. But yeah, Jesse does not look well. He could kill himself or just engage in super risky behavior and get himself killed. He seems like he's not dealing. He's not coping.
Right, and I would be worried about him, except for that we've seen this before, and I feel like it was slightly worse before. He's on the downward trend here, but in season 4, when his life was in Gus's hands and he just had nothing to live for, and he was just like letting hobos live in his house and playing games and living large, but really living a hollow life existence outside of work. I think that was his lowest point, maybe. Or do you want to make a case that he's getting close to that or lower now? But that's my interpretation so far.
Well, I don't know if I necessarily want to commit to which is lower than the other. They both seem low, but I like your point that yeah, he has shown that if you give him a job, a purpose, a reason to get out of bed in the morning, he can pull it back together. So fingers crossed. Let's hope.
Yeah, we'll see. It's hard for him.
So a couple other things, or I guess one more thing I have. Lydia's somehow getting 68% pure meth. Does that mean Todd is still cooking it, and Todd's just not that good? Because even
Yeah,
Jesse can do 96%. We've learned.
right. I feel like Walt gave her enough to go off of, and it was too little, too quickly, or which is another interesting thing for Walt to, and not to sidetrack your thought, we can come back to mine, but for Walt to pull out and be done after a few months. I mean, they do have this locker somewhere full of boatloads of cash,
Yeah.
so quote unquote maybe he's won, but yeah, to your point. Lydia didn't know what to do enough with that formula, or something went wrong. So that's how I see it.
Right. And again, as we mentioned, she says Walt's putting her in a box. That sounds pretty ominous and pretty scary to me.
Yeah, she has some responsibilities or some commitments, I guess, with the Czech Republic. Although we heard a different percentage for the Czech Republic, like they only have meth at 60%, and they use it more than we do in the U.S. Or I don't remember the percentage, but I think it might have been lower than 68. So 68 might still be higher than what she needs, but maybe still not high enough by what she was expecting.
Right, so Todd's better than your average Czech. If it's Todd, it's better than average Czech meth cook. But I can see why they'd be upset if they were getting super pure meth and then all of a sudden the quality dropped. I mean, that would make any buyer a little bit upset, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I would assume so, especially if the pricing wasn't adjusted accordingly, and
Right.
if meth is a product where that difference we saw in a previous episode with who's the guy who got shot in the face, the other cook,
Gale.
Gale. At one stage in a flashback, and this is a previous season, but Gale says something to Gus that's like, I can get us to 96%, but this other product is 99, and Gus is like, good, that's perfect, close enough, and he's like, no, that last 3% is a huge deal.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
And everyone from Tuco to Gus and everyone down the line, they've all been very impressed with Walt's product. So it seems like that is kind of a big deal. So
right.
yeah, that's the first episode. Kept my heart going, kept me laughing, feeling like shit, which, as you know, for my Mad Men recaps, is a good thing for me generally in a show. I'm excited for the rest.
Nice. So, last thought from me. Now, all of this is blending together because I watched so much Breaking Bad in the last
Yeah,
couple
I
of
bet.
weeks. So, you'll have to stop me if I'm going too far back, behind the beginning of this first episode of these last episodes. But um, did you find it believable for Walt to make the case that um, he needed to keep going with cooking because there was that speech where he talked about how he sold the investment in his company
Uh-huh.
for only $5,000 and he wants to win, and a $5 million payoff just wasn't good enough, even though Mike and Jesse were both like, come on dude, $5 million is a lot of money. And to Walt, this is another economic meta point of sorts, and I had a hard time with it. I felt like it wasn't quite as believable as I wanted it to be. Like, really? Is Walt to the point where $5 million isn't going to pay him off? But then we see him with the boatload of money that Skylar can't even count anymore, and that seems to be enough, which is a lot more than $5 million. So anyway, I just want your opinion on, for you, Logan, is $5 million enough of a buy-off, or I don't know how to ask this question.
Well, for me, it is, but I feel like if you understand that the most important thing to Walt is to win, and if he's still got on his mind that the people who he was in business with are richer than them, that they beat him in this, then he can see it as winning only if he gets filthy, disgustingly rich, and perhaps ultimately even richer than they are, because he wants to win. That's how the people in that income level keep score, I guess.
I guess because it's kind of weird for me to say, but I feel like all of the slippery slope, I'm okay with children dying now, felt more reasonably believable to me somehow, disturbingly so still, but then like, and maybe I'm projecting too much of my own.
Well, come on. I mean, we'd like $5 million, but $5 million is not FU money. You know what I mean? You can spend $5 million in a lifetime without much trouble.
That's true. Yeah, it feels like FU money for a guy who was making 40,000 a year as a school teacher, though, right? Or maybe not. Maybe at this stage he needs a lot more than that because, like you said, he's dealing with Gus level expectations from he's this far into it. I don't know.
And it only makes sense if you think that Walt is not like a normal person anymore, though, because he's Scarface. This is part of his flaw, his supervillain flaw, that he always needs more. He always needs to win. Um, so that's how it resonates with me. But you're right. This is an example of him not doing what you and I would do. I agree with that.
Yeah, because just take it one step further. Even when the kid died on the bike, and he just was so logically methodical with like, here are our three options. We can off Todd, we can uh, pay him off and have him go away, or we can keep him on the team. And a kid just died, and Walt cut right through that and was like, this is how we got to deal with it, and this is how I'm to this level of being invested in this whole situation. And I was like, okay, it makes sense. But then the money one, I think it's just my personal preference showing through. But now he's lost me. Like I can't relate to him even logically anymore.
Well, fair enough. Fair enough. You can keep that in your head and see if he pulls up from that any as we go on.
All right.
Well, that's this week's Breaking Bad recap on Practically Culture Breaking Bad. Find us on iTunes, practicallyculture.com, and YouTube. And for more TV and movies, if you've liked what you've heard, check out those other offerings.
Nice.